Hello AP Biology students, we're going to go over the 11th section in Unit 2. This section is going to start the content on cell communication. During this part of Unit 2, we're talking about how cells communicate with each other. And all multicellular organisms are going to communicate between their different types of cells or tissues. I always think of like a city where there are tons of signs and ways that things are trying to communicate things with you. And these signs can either tell you to go somewhere, to not go somewhere, to maybe get rerouted to go to a different place. But basically, there's a lot of communication going on with these signs. And that's the same thing that happens in your body. Your cells are going to communicate with each other by sending and receiving signaling molecules. This helps your multicellular body respond to the changing environment. I like showing these two images when talking about this type of cell communication, where we're having a secreting cell, the cell that's going to produce this signaling molecule, and a target cell, the cell that's receiving the molecule. And like the little image above, you can see this cell is sending and receiving a message to this cell. However, not all cells are going to receive that message. We only want certain cells to receive a message and respond because that response needs to be specific. Not every one of your cells are going to respond to a single message because it wouldn't be efficient or good for the body. Now, the first type of signal transduction, the first type of cell communication is going to be something called autocrine. This occurs when the cell targets itself. You can see in our illustration here, this secreting cell is also the target cell. It's going to produce a molecule that's going to create a response inside the cell. My analogy for this is when you leave yourself a note or reminder for later for you to respond to something. Our next type of cell communication is going to be cell-to-cell, also known as juxtacrine. This is where the membranes of two cells are going to be touching, and the communication occurs between the proteins that allow for a tunnel to be produced between the cells. You can see here in our illustration, our secreting cell and our target cell, the message, these little red dots, are going to go through these membrane proteins. My analogy for this is a paper note, which might not make sense because I am old enough to have passed notes in school. You guys have probably cell phones that you grew up with, but back in my days, we had to pass messages through a paper note. You're actually physically giving that note to somebody, and that's kind of like this cell-to-cell communication. Our next type of communication between cells is short distance. And like the name implies, it occurs over a short distance where we're going to have a secreting molecule and a target cell that aren't touching, but they are only a short distance away from each other. You can subdivide short distance into paracrine and synaptic, synaptic being when nerve cells and neurotransmitters are involved, and paracrine is just when they are close to each other. But the analogy here is like a Snapchat. This is only going to go to a single person or a single cell. Our last main type of cell communication is something called long distance. This is again going to occur over a longer distance. Typically, this goes through the circulatory system, but it's going to go from one part of the body to another. So you can see our signaling cell here is going to send the signaling molecule through the bloodstream to a target cell. You might hear this to be referred to as the endocrine system, but typically these use hormones to create some cellular response across the body. My analogy here is it's like a Facebook post where you send it out to everyone, however, not everyone's going to respond to it. Like on Facebook, you might put it out to everyone, but only a select few people might respond to it. Just like in your body, the blood system might have this signaling molecule, but only the target cells are going to respond to that signaling molecule. And like always, we're going to end this with a meme. How do cells communicate? By a cell phone. And just so we're clear, this is what cell phones looked like when I was younger.